This is the principle of a drug addict's life. They need to constantly deceive someone to gain an opportunity to use.
If at some point a person was interesting to me, I would add this to the water. Interesting in the sense that they have wealthy parents, they have a car, they have some status in society. Cool in a car, everyone with nice phones and gold, and you think, oh dear, we need such a person.
The modern world is a world of information technology. One way or another, technological progress has taught us to strive to control events in our lives. But do we notice when control is established over us? For example, through drugs. Millions of people become victims of addiction. These are people of different genders and ages, wealthy and living below the poverty line, creative and pragmatic. People of absolutely different social statuses, but caught in the drug loop through the same mechanism.
Hi, so what did you reply to him? Are you going? He's a nice guy, we know each other. I'll just give it a try. What do you mean by I'll try? Use your brain. Don't you understand what this is about? What's so special about it? Once someone was offered to try. Look.
'18th century, China, the richest state in the world. In Western countries, Chinese porcelain, silk, and tea are in demand. China receives payment for its goods in silver and gold. But at some point, Britain decides to trade differently. From the 1770s, right after the conquest of India, the English took control of opium production. And just a few years later, Great Britain began importing drugs into China. From 1830 to 1837, English opium exports to China increased from 2,000 boxes to 39,000. Such scales were unimaginable for any modern drug cartels. By the end of the 1830s, its use had taken on the character of a national disaster. Even regular troops, necessary for maintaining order, smoked the drug. In 1839, Emperor Daoguang began actively fighting against drug trafficking. In March of that year, Chinese troops seized and destroyed a huge shipment of smuggled opium, thousands of boxes. The supply scheme for the drug began to collapse. But the British aristocracy was not willing to give up the enormous profits brought by drug trafficking. And in April 1840, Great Britain officially declared war on China. The First Opium War began. It was accompanied by unprecedented brutality from the English troops, resulting in the destruction of a large number of civilians. In August 1842, after a series of heavy defeats, China capitulated. Stirring up a savage mood, the Daily Telegraph wrote, "One way or another, we must act with terror. Enough leniency. The Chinese must be taught to appreciate the English, who are above them, and who should become their masters." In 1856, the Second Opium War begins. At the end of October 1856, the English squadron subjected the city of Guangzhou to barbaric bombardment, resulting in it being almost burned to the ground. China capitulates and ultimately loses its independence. In addition to paying a huge indemnity, the criminal opium trade was fully legalized. Due to drugs, wealthy and prosperous China turned into a raw materials appendage of the Western powers for many decades.
Yes, it's interesting, of course. A whole country was hooked on drugs, but that was 200 years ago. Oh, has anything changed now? We are not ancient China. What does this have to do with us?
Yes, a similar war is now being waged against our country.
Narcotic substances are still a powerful tool of geopolitical aggression today. Today, Afghanistan is the main center of global heroin production. The American authorities turned this country into a global heroin factory after deploying their troops in 2001 under the pretext of a counterterrorism operation. Since the beginning of the occupation of Afghanistan by American troops, heroin production in the country has increased 40 times. Now, 1 in 6 residents here is involved in the opium business. If in the early 2000s opium fields covered 8,000 hectares now, when there is supposedly a fight against terrorism in Afghanistan, there are already 200,000 such fields. As of today, the income from drug trafficking amounts to about $150 billion a year. Since the occupation of Afghanistan by Americans, the flow of heroin to Russia has sharply increased. Well-organized technical and transport-supported channels for drug trafficking have emerged. 21% of all the heroin produced in the world is imported, specifically into our country. Starting from 2005, a flow of synthetic drugs from Asia, known as spices and salts, various smoking mixtures, has flooded into Russia. Hundreds of laboratories are now working on creating new narcotic substances that cause instant addiction and are primarily aimed at youth.
Indeed, so many years have passed, and the methods of war remain the same. Weaken the country with drugs, and then seize it. But what does this mean for me? And what do you think they offered you? Well, opium. Obviously, I'm not going to buy drugs. Here, everything is legal. Once opium was legal and sold in stores. Come on.
A drug war is currently being waged against Russia. Here are just some of its consequences. If in 1989 were about 50,000 drug addicts in our country, now there are more than 7 million.
Through these thefts, robberies, drug possession, use and distribution, problems with the authorities begin. Over time, this led me to prison.
About 120,000 people are imprisoned each year for the sale, acquisition, and possession of drugs.
As a member of the Public Council under the Federal Penitentiary Service, I often visit correctional facilities. From experience, I can tell you that about 50% of all crimes are related to drug distribution and use. One stole to earn money for a dose, another delivered that dose to him, and the third sold it. If we add to this the crimes committed under the influence of alcohol, we get more than 70–80% of crimes that drug addiction brings to our society.
And you can die from a single dose, well, just out of foolishness. There are many examples where people, having used it just once, that's it. Well, that's their last time.
About 100,000 people die from drug use in our country every year. Of these, 40% are youth aged 12 to 17.
For the first time, mortality from drug use reached 100,000 people per year. 40. 1,000 of those 100 who die from drugs each year are teenagers. This is the future of our country, our population that will replace the current generation. If this population is sick, then, accordingly, a good future for the country is impossible to expect.
Drugs really kill strangely. So many deaths because of them. And they were indeed sold in stores. Yes, they are still being sold there. What do you mean? Alcohol and cigarettes, what do you think? Food products, perhaps? These are really the most common drugs.
It should be noted that the spread of drug addiction is facilitated by the presence of so-called legalized drugs in society. Drugs that are readily available and can be easily purchased. For example, tobacco. Cigarettes contain nicotine, a powerful narcotic poison. The World Health Organization officially classifies it as a drug, the use of which is one of the 10 most common causes of premature death worldwide. Also, one of the most common drugs in our country is alcohol. The basis of any alcoholic product, beer, wine, vodka, cognac, regardless of whether they are expensive or not, is ethyl alcohol.
The World Health Organization adopted a declaration back in 1975. According to this declaration, alcohol is classified as a drug.
According to the GOST adopted back in 1972, ethyl alcohol is a flammable, colorless liquid with a characteristic smell. It belongs to potent drugs that initially cause excitement and then paralysis of the nervous system.
A recent incident with my acquaintances when a girl consumed alcohol for the first time ever and drank it after her first exam at the institute. As a result, being heavily intoxicated, she simply didn't make it home, just 100 meters away, and froze.
It should be noted that 97% of tobacco production in Russia belongs to foreign companies. The Russian tobacco market is divided between Japan, the USA, and the UK. More than 90% of all alcohol enterprises in Russia also belong to foreigners. For example, the beer market is almost completely monopolized by 4 companies from Belgium, Turkey, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Thus, legalized narcotic substances not only destroy people's health, but are essentially a weapon of geopolitical aggression. According to statistics, almost all drug addicts began their journey into addiction with smoking cigarettes and consuming alcohol.
Wow. Alcohol and cigarettes in our country are made by foreigners, and they even pass them off as food products. How do drugs affect DNA?
It is important to note that drugs lead to the degeneration of future generations, destroying people's reproductive health. Narcotic substances are mutagens, meaning they destroy the genetics of cells. When such destruction occurs in germ cells, it leads to various health deviations in future children. Female germ cells are formed in a girl even before birth. Throughout life, they do not renew or reproduce. Narcotic substances are carried by the blood throughout the body and have a destructive effect on all its cells, including the reproductive ones. And it is impossible to predict which cell will give rise to new life, whether it is healthy or damaged by drugs. Damage to germ cells often leads to infertility or the birth of sick children.
The egg and sperm, which carry genetic information, are exposed to the toxic effects of drugs or alcohol. And inside the egg, there are chromosomes from the sperm. And these chromosomes can be damaged, so-called microfractures of the genetic material of chromosomes occur.
Even small doses of drugs cause irreparable harm to a man's reproductive health, destroying his reproductive system. In a man's testes, there are special cells called spermatogonia, from which sperm, male reproductive cells, are formed in stages. New spermatogonia appear through division, during which genetically identical cells are formed. The drug destroys their DNA. As a result, all newly formed sperm carry damaged genes. This leads to male infertility or the birth of children with mental and physical disabilities.
There is no such thing as a one-time occurrence. You can't be a little dead, just as you can't be a little pregnant, you see. Therefore, even a single use of drugs puts a person at high risk.
With each use of any drug, a person takes away their chance to become a father or mother, depriving their future child of health, intellectual and creative abilities.
It's a joke. So what is the government doing then? Yes, it is doing something. Normal laws are being enacted. It's not very noticeable. Drug dealers constantly create new types of drugs that the law doesn't even manage to ban in time. So what should be done? There are people who are used to blaming everyone around for their problems. The government, parents, various circumstances. You need to think for yourself about what you are doing and why. Otherwise, you'll end up on someone else's leash.
It is unlikely to meet a person who hasn't heard about the dangers of drugs. Torturous withdrawals, HIV infection, death from overdoses. Yet, for some reason, every day someone starts using drugs, taking the first step on the path to nowhere. It often happens that the first dose can be offered by a friend, acquaintance, or even a buddy.
It was 9th to 11th grade, and we had a place, where those students gather who are a bit more interested in not studying, but in cigarettes, you know what I mean, alcohol, drugs, etc.
They were older guys. It's a shame to be half-powered there, but you won't be cool.
At some point, your acquaintance or friend starts talking about how good it feels when he uses, and offers you to try it. Think about it and ask yourself, why does he need this? Sometimes the one who offers to try the drug simply does not understand where it leads.
And, of course, he promotes it. Oh, it's cool, it's great, let's sniff it once. I mean, he kind of promotes that it's good. Why? Because he himself does not yet know the consequences, does not know what will happen.
Literally in a year, what his life will turn into, but usually drugs are offered for 3 reasons. First, money is needed for a dose. Every drug addict, whether he wants it or not, starts to distribute this. It happens as follows. A person who has become a drug addict needs money to get a dose. It's already hard to take from parents, and you can't get a job in such a state, so he starts offering drugs to everyone he knows. A drug addict who has involved 3 or 4 people in using drugs takes drugs at their expense. He sold 3 doses and kept the 4th for himself.
There was a girl who was the daughter of quite wealthy parents, and the guys got her hooked so that she could also support their use.
You are not needed there as a person, but just as a wallet. They use you as...
The necessity. To use drugs themselves and the need to earn through you is the second reason why they offer to try drugs. It is the fear of falling alone. Very often, a person not realizing it pulls those around them into addiction because they do not want to hit rock bottom alone. They act on the principle that if they are going to sink, they might as well do it together. An addict already understands that they are doing something not very good, and psychologically, doing something bad alone feels uncomfortable.
Therefore, they try to pull others into drug use. It seems like I am not alone, and it kind of dilutes my responsibility for what is happening onto other people who are doing something bad with me.
According to statistics, every drug addict sooner or later hooks 10 to 15 people from their surroundings.
Right now, I am observing a 13-year-old boy. We talked, and he told me the following. My older brother got me hooked on drugs. I asked him, please tell me, how many people have you offered drugs to, and how many people are using drugs now because of you? He said a terrifying number. He said 22 people who are now heavily into drugs.
The third reason is the desire to make money from drug trafficking, involving more and more people in their use. A drug dealer profits from those who use drugs. Their main task is to ensnare into addiction. Each drug user provides their dealer with a steady income.
Well, they don't offer this to you out of good friendship, not because they want to be friends with you, socialize, or because it's interesting. It's only interesting to make money off you, as if they are draining everything from you, even against your will. And the very first time you are offered drugs, you should stop communicating with that person altogether. Because in my view, for my life, it's death. 100% death. There are prisons, there are hospitals, but it all ultimately leads to death. Just imagine that the person who offered you drugs is giving you a slow bullet to the head.
I fully understand that this could be a good friend, a childhood friend,
but what it entails, it's better to lose all those childhood friends than to face this.
Even if you have acquaintances, close friends, good friends nearby, if they offer you something to consume that promises you joy, fun, or a good mood, I recommend not to fall for these suggestions and perhaps even physically leave the place under various pretexts, to exit the company for any reason, and so on. This will save your life, your fate.
So what should I do then? Go live on a deserted island? Who would I talk to then? Almost all my acquaintances either smoke or do something else. Think for yourself about who you are friends with and who you communicate with. There are people who can make you stronger and help you achieve success. And there are those who just drag you down. Your environment determines your future, who you will become. Seek out people who make not only themselves better, but also the world around them.
We have been engaged in this activity for many years. We visit various state institutions, orphanages, boarding schools, hospitals, and do murals there.
Most of the children in these institutions are social orphans. That is, they have parents, but they have been deprived of parental rights. The common reason is alcohol and drugs. If a drug is offered to a girl, she needs to think about what kind of children she will have, whether she will have children at all, how it will affect her life, and how it will impact her family.
For this room, we chose a marine theme for boys to make it something interesting and inspiring.
Children's perception and their path to recovery greatly depend on the environment surrounding them. If children are surrounded by comfort, kindness, and warmth, it will contribute to their recovery and improvement.
When a person grows up in an aesthetic, beautiful environment, they have a completely different worldview. It's a time to think and dream, and a diverse personality develops. You go to a boarding school and see how everything happens, gaining new experiences each time, and life becomes more and more interesting with each step. Despite standing here and spending my time and resources, I know that later I will have a great uplift and inspiration.
And there will even be a feeling that I have gained this energy. That is, I did not spend it, but rather acquired it, because this is one of those processes whereby giving, you receive more.
At the end of the day, I feel joy if that day was not lived in vain. If I did something important, something necessary for someone, if I helped someone.
It seems natural to live this way, to help each other, to help people, to help those in need, to give something.
To look into my consciousness that today I will make this world a little bit better.
Hi, how are you? I got it for you. When will you pick it up?
Well, yeah, I'm already on my way. I almost fell for it. Better stop before you get involved with your drugs.
Damn. It seems like you want to back out. What are you talking about? What drugs? It's just to relax and forget about problems. What's wrong with that?
Then forget about me. Don't write to me anymore.
What's wrong? Well, screw you. There are still plenty of losers.